The 361st edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year, the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. About four and a half hours since the last time we were live, recapping Carolina's win over Florida State in the ACC quarterfinals. We're back tonight here to get you ready for Carolina and Pittsburgh. That game will come your way tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. It'll be either be on ESPN or ESPN2 as Carolina will look to advance to the ACC Tournament championship game. Well, they will await the winner, or if they were to advance, they would take on either NC State, Virginia, or Boston College. After State, the 10 seed, upset second-seeded Duke to win their third game in 3 days. We waited to get through the first game of the night session to come on here and record, and now we're here to get you ready for Carolina and Pittsburgh. We'll do what we always do whenever we preview a game. We'll take a look at the opponent, look at the game from Carolina's perspective. We'll revisit the lone matchup between these two schools back in early January, have our discussion topic, and, of course, keys to the game and pick the game. But we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. And we go to Harry Truman for today's pod thought, and his thought is, quote, "The successful person has enthusiasm. Good work is never done in cold blood. Heat is needed to forge anything." There's one thing we've talked about this team all year long, and this is an enthusiastic bunch. This is a group of guys and players that love to let their emotions hang out, and then they show up on the basketball court. And you saw it. You saw it today. You know, Carolina's up 25, and they're diving for loose balls. They're busting their butts for offensive rebounds and still trying to create positive plays on the basketball court, no matter the score, no matter when it's been going good for Carolina. And obviously at 26-6, there's been a lot of good. Even when there's been some bad, though, there's been a positive body language. And, a lot of people might think you make too much about something like that. But after seeing the way this team last year just went through the motions, never really seemed to care if they won, never really seemed to care if they lose, it's been refreshing to see, this group of kids, this team, really just let it all hang out. And, it's led by the transfers in Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram. It's one of the things they've brought to this team. They've brought an edge to Carolina. And it's a big reason why the Heels have had the season they've had so far to this point in March.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing that, a lot of these other teams that we've seen in the ACC really just seem to lack. And for Carolina, I think you saw it today. It was the big reason why they won this game, because they were more than capable of losing this game if they weren't careful. We've seen that this is a team in Florida State that has fought this Carolina team very hard. And Carolina, came out, and to their credit, I mean, Florida State battled early on. But again, we said it, when we we're recapping the game. When Carolina turns it on, I mean, it's starting to get very similar to what we see with teams like UConn, Purdue, Houston. Although to me, like I've watched those other three teams. I still think UConn and Houston are ahead of Purdue. I think Carolina is just as good as Purdue and would probably beat them if they played them right now. So I mean, I think you gotta like what you saw today. Now the question is that, can you carry that over into a second game against a team that, we've talked about it even this year. Carolina came out, they won the matchup with Pitt handedly in Pitt's place. I wouldn't say handedly, but more comfortably than anything, mainly because of how they played defensively. But we've talked about it so much the last couple of years with this matchup. This is a game that matters more to Pitt than it matters to Carolina. Pitt sees this as a rivalry game. There's extra motivation because of Jason Capel. So, Carolina this year, I still feel like early in that game, it looked like the game meant a little bit more to Pitt. But as that game wore along, you started to see Carolina's fight. This time around, I think Carolina's taken on the mindset that we heard from Hubert Davis when he talked about the team in the Final Four back in 21-22. This is a group that's looking for a fight, and I'm interested to see if we see that in the second game of this ACC tournament tomorrow against Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I do want to apologize for the visual. You will see me frequently blowing my nose during tonight's episode. It's March,
which that's
means
lovely.
It's not only the college basketball season, it's allergy season, and allergies have definitely started kicking my butt. Past year's game meant more to Carolina or to Pittsburgh. We saw in January how much this game meant to Carolina. I remember Jones Angel sending a tweet about just the locker room and how excited they were to beat Pittsburgh. I don't think it's going to be lost on Carolina the way Pitt has acted the last couple of years, the things that they said. And look, no one is surprised when Jeff Capel runs his mouth. The dude's a walking, talking scumbag. But when Jason Capel, one of your own, is getting in those antics, that's a hard thing to swallow for a program that's built on family and the values of family.
Well, I got to be worse. I got to be honest. At this point, he's worse. Like, he is just a pathetic loser that didn't do anything in his time at Carolina. Like, what did you do when you were at Carolina? You were the best player on a team that won 8 games. Like, congratulations. I don't really think that's something to brag about. Like, honestly, you're a reject, and that's why you're on the bench with your brother. So, I mean, to me, it's almost worse. Like, Jeff Capel, I don't feel like he really talks as much as Jason. It's just Jason has some thing in his mind. He's basically just like Rashad McCants at this point, where he has some vendetta that he made up in his own head that people hate him. And at this point, you know what? We're going to embrace it because we absolutely hate your guts and we never want to see you ever in Chapel Hill again. Because honestly, you're right there with McCants. You're right there with Larry Drew. So yeah, I mean, you're right. That I do remember Jones Angel saying that there was a lot of motivation. And I mean, for Carolina, there should be plenty of motivation coming into this game because there's a chance. I mean, if you beat their tail, I mean, if you come out and just destroy this team, you could eliminate them from the NCAA tournament, which I think would just be tremendous.
Yeah, so I think you're going to see a motivated team. You're going to see a team that isn't going to rest on the laurels and just be satisfied with beating them once. They owe Pittsburgh for a couple of of losses that they've given Carolina in recent years, and I think it's why it's going to set up for a fantastic matchup, on a Friday night, which is what you expect in the ACC tournament once you get to the semis. Speaking of Pitt, they entered 22-10. They're 12-8, or they went 12-8 in the ACC in the regular season. They advanced to the semis after beating Wake Forest in the quarterfinals, a game that, Pitt led by double digits, but it was a 2-point game late, but they were able to make winning plays down the stretch in a de facto elimination game. That game took Wake Forest out of the running to make the NCAA tournament. And for Pitt, it keeps their hopes alive. I think a win over Carolina probably puts them in the field, and rightfully so. They, have 23 wins. They'd be playing for an ACC tournament championship. They would have had a win over the best team in the league, and you finish top 4 in the ACC. In my book, that's good enough to make the NCAA tournament. So that motivation will be on the line for them, where they are playing for their NCAA tournament lives, where Carolina right now is basically playing for maybe getting that last one seed, but we'll talk about that here in just a minute. On a neutral court, Pittsburgh is 2-1 this season after earning the win against Wake Forest earlier this afternoon. They have 3 players that average double-figure scoring, led by Blake Henson, 18.8 points, 4.6 rebounds, 0.8 assists. He shoots 46% from the field, 42% from 3. Carlton Carrington is the second leading scorer, 13.6 points, 5.2 rebounds, 4.2 assists. He shoots 41% from the field, 31% from 3. And then Ishmael Leggett, the last guy to average double-figure scoring at 11.9 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2 assists. He shoots 42% from the field and 34% from 3. We know how good Blake Henson is. Carrington has been one of the nicest surprises, in the ACC. It absolutely baffles me that a guy that wears long sleeves is that good of a basketball player. He should be teed up the second that he walks on the court for looking like an idiot. But the thing about Pitt, man, is they've got talent, and it's something that you expect because Jeff Capel is a good recruiter. And so they've got players that, A, are just high-quality basketball players, but, B, they play with a level of physicality and a level of toughness that Carolina will have to match and exceed tomorrow night.
Yeah, look, defensively, that was the big thing we were focused on the first time that these two teams played was, Pittsburgh was a team that came in as one of the better defensive teams in the country. Carolina, at that time, remember, they really weren't that great of a defensive team. They had a great performance against Oklahoma, but there were still a lot of questions about what Carolina was defensively. This was the game that really springboarded Carolina because they shut down Blake Henson and nobody else was really able to pick up the slack. With this team, it's pretty simple, man. Blake Henson is their best player. If he has a big night, then it's going to set everybody else up. And, Bub Carrington, one of Corey Alexander's guys. I mean, I cannot get that out of my head from the first time that these two teams matched up. And that's all we heard. Half the game was spent just telling you how he knew his dad or whatever the hell he was rambling on about. But you're right. He's a heck of a player, man. I mean, this conference had some really good freshmen this year. And Carrington was one of them. And so that's where they're hoping they can sort of supplement some of that scoring if Blake Henson doesn't have a big night. And you started to see it more and more as the year has gone along. So, look, they've got good size on the inside with the Diaz-Graham twins, Federico. Those guys held up a lot better in the first matchup against Armando Bacot than they did in the previous years that they matched up against him. So it'll be interesting. Can Armando sort of counter that and respond with a big game against these guys, something he's done the last few years, or is this another one of those games? Could this be one of those defensive battles yet again between two teams that are, amongst the better defensive teams in the ACC?
Yeah, you look at this game, switching over to the Carolina perspective. Carolina now 26-6 after the win today against Florida State. They went 17-3 in the league in the regular season. With the win today, they've now beaten 18, or they've won 18 ACC games. Of course, they advanced to the semis, as I mentioned, after dispatching Florida State 92-67 in a game that was close for about the first 10 minutes or so. But once Carolina turned on the light switch, they ran away from the Noles. Carolina on a neutral court, they're now 4-3 after the win today in the ACC tournament. You know, Carolina does have 4 players averaging double-figure scoring. These numbers are the same that they were the last time we previewed a game because ESPN.com hasn't updated, but we'll go back through them. RJ Davis leads the team in scoring, 21.1 points, 3.7 rebounds, 3.5 assists, shooting 43% from the field, 42% from three. Armando Bacot, the second leading scorer, at 13.9 points, 10.1 rebounds, 1.6 assists. He's shooting 54% from the field. Harrison Ingram, third on the team in scoring, at 12.5 points, 9.3 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 43% from the field, 37% from three. And then Cormac Ryan, the last guy to average double-figure scoring, at 11.5 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 1.3 assists. He's shooting 38% from the field, 34% from three. And Carolina is 8th in the country in rebounds at over 40 rebounds per game. So I mentioned that Pittsburgh playing for their NCAA tournament lives. And I believe a win for Pitt puts them in the field. Carolina obviously securely, safely in the field, but in the discussion to be that final number 1 seed, they had Joe Lenardi on after the Duke and NC State game went final.
Oh, of course they did.
And he believes that if Carolina wins out and Tennessee wins out, despite Carolina getting the head-to-head, because they beat Tennessee in the ACC SEC Challenge, that Tennessee would get the final 1 seed because their quality of wins would exceed Carolina's quality of wins in the SEC tournament. Sure. I don't necessarily disagree with that. If the tournament goes chalk for the SEC, then yeah, you're not going to be facing. There's a good chance that Carolina could face a double-digit seed in the ACC tournament final if they were to get there. But do you think after seeing the way Carolina played today, that this is a team that wants to get that final 1 seed? Because I think for people that don't understand the way that seeding and bracketing works, just because Carolina would be the final 1 seed in the West doesn't mean they play their first round and second round games out West.
Right.
Their first round game and their second round game, if they were to advance, would still be in Charlotte. That's where Carolina is going to be next Thursday and hopefully next Saturday when the NCAA tournament gets underway. And we'll talk about something else here in a minute that's in regards to wanting to win this event. But, we've talked about how hungry this team is and how motivated this team is. They got an ACC regular season title. With the way they look today, they didn't look satisfied. And it has the look of a team that wants to get that final 1 seed heading into the big dance.
Well, and I got to be honest, who could blame them at this point? We saw – they didn't look their best that they've looked all season today, but UConn is a team that we talked about how good they are. We've seen Houston multiple times, and I got to be honest, that is a team that you do not want to see until as late as possible in the NCAA tournament. Look, it's not – you've kind of taken it as, oh, we're afraid to play these teams. No, but the thing is you want to see those teams as late in the tournament as possible, just so that, hey, if you are going to run into those types of games, especially, having to run into that out west in the Elite Eight, if you did, go out west and you run into Houston out there for some reason, that's, you don't want to have to deal with that. You'd much rather hold on to that, face that team in the Final Four stage that they have not been on, by the way. This group, Kelvin Sampson has been there, but for this group, it's completely different. So, I I would say I want the 1 seed. The more I've thought about it, I would want the 1 seed because, as you said, when it's going to ultimately matter is the second weekend. They would go out west to play the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games. First weekend doesn't matter. They'll be in a region that's close because the NCAA wants to sell as many tickets as possible. You would believe that that's going to be Charlotte, barring something shocking, because, I mean, I think I asked you this question recently, like, what's the second closest destination that Carolina could go to? I mean, I don't think there's probably any places that come to mind. I mean, I don't
probably
know,
somewhere in Florida, Jacksonville, Tampa, somewhere down
something
there.
like that. So that's really not that close. I mean, Carolina, wherever you go, there are going to be fans there, but yeah, it'll probably end up being Charlotte. So, I mean, yeah, I think that probably is what this team is after. We heard Armando Bacot say that in his presser yesterday, that this is a team that's still hungry. They want that last 1 seed. And to me, if they win the ACC tournament, they should be the last 1 seed, because I don't care about who Tennessee has played since. Here's the thing. We saw these two teams match up in Chapel Hill, and Carolina beat their ass. Like, what has changed since then? I don't care that they play in a conference that you look at and say is supposedly better. By the way, I've seen that conference play. There are some good teams out there. There are also a lot of teams that don't know how to play defense in that conference. So if Tennessee was in the ACC, are we sure Tennessee would be as good as they are right now? Like, I mean, I think they're a very good basketball team, but I think they'd be very similar to Carolina, or, I mean, below Carolina. So, I mean, yeah, that to me, I think that's what the team is after. And if they win this conference tournament, regardless of who they have to play, we've seen it play out before. They should be the team that gets selected as the final number 1 seed over Tennessee.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's obviously a great debate. That's what we love about this time of the year. And look, head to head, if their metrics were more even, then Carolina would have the advantage. But because that's not the first thing of criteria, there will be an advantage there for Tennessee. I think personally, Carolina's better. I think you put them on a neutral court. I think Carolina beats Tennessee.
Well, we know Carolina's better. We've seen the game. We know they're better.
I mean, that game was in Chapel Hill, so but I think it's a game you put it on a neutral floor. I think Carolina beats them, and there's a very good chance that maybe they'll find that they'll be on a neutral court in the NCAA tournament. But I've always believed that if you win an ACC regular season title, you're a national title contender. I think if you win it, if you sweep your conference, and because this doesn't happen with all the Power 5 conferences, I think if you sweep your conference regular season and you win your conference tournament, you should be a 1 seed. Unless you just got a wild resume and you've got a bunch of bad losses stacked in between. Carolina doesn't have that, so I think if they win tomorrow, no matter who they play on Saturday, they'll be the final 1 seed in the NCAA tournament when we get to the bracket on Selection Sunday. We've set the scene for Carolina and Pittsburgh. I think we're all cautiously, or not cautiously, I think we're all excited about this one. It's going to feel, it's going to have a big game feel tomorrow in Washington, D.C. The crowd should be electric. 2 teams that have a history with one another, and it figures to be a great game. So coming up next, we'll keep on talking about the matchup. We'll revisit Carolina's win on the road back in January. We'll talk about how after Duke got beat, do we now want to win the ACC tournament after saying going into it we didn't want to win it before we give our keys to the game and pick the game. But first, we got to give you a word from one of our partners.
Hey there, Josh here for the Autograph Fandom app. Want to get rewarded for listening to our show? The team at Autograph, co-founded by Tom Brady, is redefining the fan experience by letting users earn points for the acts of fandom they take every day, like listening to this show. The Autograph Fandom app gives you access to your favorite UNC content in one place and offers rewards like tickets, exclusive merchandise, and much more. You're already listening to our show, but now you can earn points and get rewarded for it. Head over to the Apple App Store and search for Autograph Fandom Rewarded and download it today for free using the referral code HEELTOUGH. Link and code are also in our podcast description.
Want to welcome everyone back inside another live edition of the Four Corners Podcast, hanging out with you on a Thursday night. Conference tournaments still going crazy. The ACC quarterfinal, the final game is being played right now. Boston College leading Virginia 20-15. My second TV screen, Villanova leading Marquette 15-12 in the last Big East quarterfinal matchup. And Carolina already through with their quarterfinal game. They're on to the semis where they're going to meet the Pittsburgh Panthers. And these two teams met back in early January, right about the time. I mean, it was Carolina's second ACC game, but it was the first one of the new year. And it was a game that Carolina won 70-57. And if you guys remember back, Carolina didn't make a field goal the first 6.5 minutes of the game, but still found themselves down 6-3 when R.J. Davis knocked in a three-pointer. This was a game that Carolina won with its defense. They held Pittsburgh to 31% shooting from the field, 17% shooting from behind the three-point line. Pitt was 5 of 29 from three. And remember, this was pre-Carolina becoming the rebounding team that we know them to be today. And they went on the road and out-rebounded Pitt 51-41. The thing about that game more than anything was Carolina just out-toughed them. They out-physicaled them. They out, if out-hearted them is even a word, Carolina did it. I mean, they outworked them. They out-physicaled them. And, we saw in the post, we talked about it with the way that team celebrated in the post-game locker room. It was personal, and it meant something to them for the way that Pitt beat them twice the year before and celebrated those wins. And you remember in Hubert Davis's first year, Pitt beat Carolina in Chapel Hill in a game at the time that we thought ended that team's chances of making the NCAA tournament. I don't think tomorrow's game is going to be quite as ugly. I don't think it's going to take Carolina 6.5 minutes to score. But I do think a lot of themes that we saw from that game will translate over into this game, primarily the rebounding. Whichever team is tougher tomorrow night, you probably figure and you probably expect that team to come away victorious. You're muted.
My bad. I don't know if we're going to nearly as many rebounds as we saw in the first game, because I don't know if we're going to see nearly as many missed shots as we saw in the first game. I mean, both of these teams shot under 36% in the first matchup, which meant that, Carolina pulls down 51 rebounds. Pittsburgh pulls down 41. So, for Carolina, you're hoping that you shoot better in this game where you don't have nearly as many opportunities. But you go back to that game and you look at who rebounded well. Armando Bacot, 10 rebounds, and the guy who led him in rebounding was Harrison Ingram. That's what you're hoping again in this matchup shows up. I mean, they had 16 offensive rebounds. Now, the problem was there were 14 for Pittsburgh, so you're going to have to limit those. It'll be interesting because the thing is it possible that Carolina comes out and shoots the way that they did in the first game? Oh, certainly, because Pittsburgh's still a good defensive team. Not nearly as good as they were early in the season. I don't think they're nearly as confident as they were early in the year because, remember, one of the things about Pittsburgh and the reason that they're solidly on the bubble is they played a horrendous non-conference schedule. I mean, they have one of the worst strength of schedules in the non-conference that any team has ever had that's been on the bubble. So, they were feeling confident heading in. They were doing a lot of good things defensively, and it carried over a little bit into this game. The thing that they do have going in their favor this time around is that Carolina could be a little bit tired in this game. Now, the good news was Carolina got a good amount of rest at the end of the Florida State game. I mean, Armando Bacot came out of this game with 9 minutes left in the game and did not re-enter because he didn't have to. They put in Jalen Washington and they said, all right, Armando, sit there and just hang out. We don't need you to come back into the game. And then RJ Davis came out with like 7 minutes to go. And eventually the rest of the guys came out of the game as well with like 5 minutes and 30 seconds left in the game. So, I mean, yeah, this should be a relatively well-rested group, but it is the second day of the tournament. So that is definitely something that could factor in. But I'd be pretty shocked for Carolina if they shoot as bad as they did in the first matchup. And even for Pittsburgh, I mean, Blake Hinson, 4-16 in the first matchup. Carolina did such a great job of defending him. And look, I think Carolina can probably have another successful day against him, but I don't know if he's going to be that inefficient from the field. Carrington, 20 points. 6 of 17, though, from the field. So, I mean, I don't know. You're asking a lot for those guys to shoot as poorly as they did in that first matchup, but I wouldn't put anything past this Carolina defense right now with how well they're playing since that second half against State.
Yeah. Like I said, this one just has the makings, I think, to be a classic, ACC tournament semifinal. Look, Carolina played at noon. You don't play again tomorrow till 7, so almost 30 hours in between the next time you play. No starter played more played more than 30 minutes. So you're going to be about as fresh as you could be when playing your second game in as many days. So moving into our discussion topic for tonight's edition of the pod, we talked going into the tournament and previewing the Florida State game, the expectations for the weekend. And we both came away saying that would like to win the first round game, but if Carolina were to lose in the semis or the final, depending on how it goes, wouldn't be ultimately upset, because if Carolina were to win the ACC tournament, they'd have to, and then they win the national championship, they'd have to win 15 straight games, which is really, really hard to do in college basketball. With Duke getting beaten earlier today and really clearing the path, because I think the thing was we don't want to lose to Duke, right? And we know that how much Duke values this tournament, how much they put into this tournament. Everybody, I would presume, expected to see Duke in the final on Saturday night. That's not going to be the case. It's either going to be NC State, which, of course, if Carolina faces State, we don't want to lose that one. It's either going to be Virginia or it's going to be Boston College. With Duke out of the way now, do you feel any differently about wanting to win this event? Or you look at it and say, it's really, really hard to go on a 15-game winning streak in college basketball, a winning streak that would still span the course of roughly 2 months since your last defeat. Would you rather Carolina, have one more loss, a chance to refocus, retool, regroup before hopefully going on a 6-game winning streak, which results in them cutting down the nets and winning a national title?
I mean, look, it's, to me, like, it's all about how it would look if you end up losing a game. Like, if you're going to get blown out, or if you're going to have a game where defensively things just start to break down, that's not what you want to see. But if this is, similar to the first game and Carolina ends up losing to Pitt, or, if they lose in the final to Boston College or Virginia, I would put it this way. It's not the end of the world. I think the more that I have thought about it, like I said earlier, I do think that getting that last number 1 seed would be big for this team, because avoiding having to play UConn or Houston until you get to the Final Four, I think, would be the best plan. But I mean, to me, like, again, I'm not going to be devastated. I feel like this team's in a pretty good spot. That we've talked about it. I mean, we talked about it last night, and we've talked about it plenty of times before when we've, previewed the ACC tournament. This is something that for Carolina is just an add-on. Like, this is not really what matters. Like, in terms of how you rank the most important things each year for Carolina, it goes national championship, Final Four, ACC regular season title, and then ACC tournament title. So, to me, I think I'm not a guy that's going to look at it and say we need to win this event in order to keep the momentum going. But I don't think it would hurt if Carolina does keep rolling, especially if they keep rolling the way that they were playing today. Like, if they can keep that up and they look the way that they look today, it's going to be really hard pressed to think that they won't be able to at least carry some of that momentum over into the NCAA tournament. But I get what you're saying as well. But yeah, I think from last night and thinking about it a little bit more, I think I have changed my stance, and I think I do want Carolina to take home this ACC title and have a chance to get that final 1 seed.
Yeah, look, I said last night that I don't put as much value and as much stock in the ACC tournament. I've always valued the regular season more because Carolina basketball has valued the regular season more since the tournament expanded to where you didn't have to win the tournament to make the NCAA tournament. Right. With that said, yeah, I want to win the stupid thing because we get into it. This tournament still means a lot to me. It's my favorite conference tournament. I watch every single game of the event, no matter what other games are going on. It's why I have 3 TVs at my disposal in my room, so I can watch the things that I want to watch. And after the embarrassment last year, to have the ability to win a regular season title, combine that with a tournament title, would just be a nice reminder to the ACC that this conference runs through Chapel Hill. Armando Bacot said the ACC runs through me after Carolina beat Duke in February. What he should have said is that the ACC runs through Chapel Hill. And that counts for the regular season, and that counts for the postseason. And so I'd love to get an ACC tournament title because there's something about this team where, a 15-game winning streak isn't out of the realm of the possibility for them because they're that hungry. They're that motivated, and they play with the desire and a relentlessness to win no matter what's on the line. That I don't think this would be a team that when we get to the NCAA tournament, they're going to run out of gas. I think they'd be able to regroup, refocus, re-energize, and realize they've got 3 more weekends to accomplish the ultimate goal. And so,
well, and the thing is you look at some of the other teams as well that we've talked about are the favorites. I mean, if they're going to end up winning a national title, I mean, it looks like, UConn could be a team that has to win somewhere in that neighborhood of 15 straight. Houston would have to win in that same neighborhood. Purdue, all of those. So I think that's the thing, is that those teams that we are looking at and saying are probably the teams that are the toughest that would be in the way for Carolina, they're all in very similar circumstances. So at this point, yeah, why not go out and win it? Because I got to tell you, like Big East, I mean, that it's so unpredictable. So that one, maybe UConn would get upset. I don't see Houston losing in the Big 12. I think they're going to win that conference tournament. And Purdue, yeah, I mean, I think the Big Ten is full of a bunch of frauds anyways. So, yeah, I would be stunned if Purdue does not win that conference tournament as well. And, yeah, it would put them in a similar circumstance. And I don't think those teams are probably looking at it and saying they want to lose either. So, yeah, at this point, what do you got to lose? This team's feeling good about themselves. Why not just make it an extended run and close the season on a 15-game winning streak?
Let's now get into our keys to the game before we pick the game between Carolina and Pittsburgh. The first key I have is to match their physicality. You got to be ready for a junkyard fight, a backyard brawl. You got to be ready to go toe-to-toe with them because this is a physical group. That's their MO. They've got size and length and athleticism. But the most important thing they do is they body you. and they make them and they make the opponent feel them. And they have the ability to wear you down. You don't get to the semifinals of the ACC tournament by accident. They won in Cameron Indoor Stadium. That's not an easy thing to do. So this is a group that's going to be physical. The first matchup was a war. They're going to look to respond. They're going to take that loss in their home building. They're going to take that personal. They're going to be reminded of it by their head coach leading up to the game. And so this has to be a game where Carolina from the opening tip is ready to go. This doesn't need to be a game where, like today, you could allow yourself to ease into it because Florida State's not good enough to just run away from anybody. And I don't think Pittsburgh is good enough to blow Carolina out, but they're good enough to where if they establish control of the game when they set the tone, then they can dictate the way the game's going to be played for 40 minutes. This has to be a game where that edge that we've talked about all season long from Cormac and Ingram, it shows up, and also that's followed by Mondo, Davis, Cadeau, Trimble, all those guys. Carolina basically, as Schubert Davis has said pretty frequently as the head coach, they got to show up looking for a fight because Pittsburgh's going to be packing their best punch.
Well, yeah, and I mean they may actually be looking for an actual fight when they show up to this game because again, it's all about their coaches who are going to be telling them before the game that this is the biggest game that they've probably played all season long. Because again, the hate is real for these guys when it comes to Carolina. So I think look, today you saw early in the game, man, Florida State was trying to make this a fight too. And we knew that was going to be the case because we remember how chippy the matchup was in Tallahassee. And Carolina came ready for that. Armando Bacot was ready. I mean, he was dominating them down in the low post. And that's where you want to see Carolina ready to go. Yeah, you want to see them ready to, get physical. If things do, get to a point where guys are getting in each other's faces, yeah, you don't want to see Carolina back down. But the most important thing is that you're physical on the boards, you're physical down low, getting position, because it feels like, again, I go back to that first matchup. Armando Bacot offensively was not great in that game. I mean, he was 5 of 10 from the field. He was solid, but it still was not the type of performance that we've seen from him at times in years past against this Pitt team inside. I think this is going to be a game where he's going to remember that, and he's going to come out motivated and want to go after these guys on the interior because I just don't think that Pittsburgh has the guys that can keep up with him on the inside. So that, to me, has to be the game plan in this game. That's how you establish that physical presence and get your guards downhill. We saw that early in the game today. That's what allowed Carolina to get comfortable in this game, allowed them to start, putting a little bit of distance between them before Cormac Ryan really opened up the perimeter shooting game in the second half. If you can do that, that's bringing the fight to Pittsburgh, and I think that'll set you up to have some pretty good success.
Second key I have for this one is you got to contain Blake Hinson. The Carolina did that in the first matchup. He scored just 11 points, was 4-16 from the field, 2 of 11 from behind the three-point line. It's hard to imagine he shoots that poorly again, but you should be confident going in that you know how to defend him. And if you remember, Carolina put a smaller defender on him in that game because it made it easier to get up in his space and get up in him and really just challenge and contest shots. I think Carolina will use, a variety of different defenders to frustrate him and really try to get in his head again because, this guy is a head case. And when it starts going bad, I mean, he starts melting down on the basketball court. He'll be motivated to bounce back. And like I said, I don't think he's going to shoot, 4 of 16, 2 of 11 from 3. But Carolina also can't let him score, in the high 20s, something that he's more than capable of doing as we've seen during his time in the ACC.
Yeah, there's so many different guys that Carolina can really, implore on him. You said that they went smaller against him the first time. Well, the thing is that Cormac Ryan is playing much better defensively now than he was back then. And so I think that's a guy that Carolina will use a lot in this game on him. I think Seth Trimble will be a guy that they will throw at him a lot as well. And you're also talking about better defense from Elliot Cadeau. I know that he had, a rough game against Notre Dame on that end of the floor, but for the most part, he's been really, really good defensively for Carolina as the season has worn along, especially as a freshman. So I think Carolina has the horses to be able to throw different things at him. And that's the other thing, is that if one guy is struggling to contain him, they will, Hubert will not wait to go ahead and switch things up. He's done it so many times this year. I think you'll see that again. And that's the biggest thing. Again, I don't think he'll shoot 4 of 16 from the field, but even if you can limit the, field goal attempts that he has from the field, get the ball out of his hands and make someone else beat you. Carrington's good, but I don't know if he's a guy that can quite, carry the weight like we've seen Hinson do at times. If you're forcing the ball out of Hinson's hands and this team just finds a way to beat you, I think we'll live with that, because I just don't know if they can trust those guys to be able to carry them if Hinson's not on top of this game.
Last key for me is rebounding, because it's really going to dictate the tempo and the pace that this game is going to be played at. Carolina won the rebounding margin back in January, 51-41, in large part because Harrison Ingram turned into an animal and just lived on the glass. Armando Bacot had double-digit rebounds in that game as well. I don't know if Carolina will rebound the ball 51 times, but they're coming off one of their more dominant rebounding performances of the season with what they did against Florida State earlier this afternoon.
Yeah.
And so Carolina needs to win the rebounding margin, because that means they can get the game up and down. Pittsburgh does not want to run. They want to make it a half-court game. So if they're able to control the glass, they can limit possessions, run clock, and all that fun stuff. So this has to be a game that not just Bacot, not just Ingram. It has to be a game like today. Withers, Trimble, Washington, all the other guys getting to the glass and really making their presence felt in that area. Because I think if Carolina wins the rebounding margin, they control the tempo of the game. It really goes a long way in their favor. Carolina can win a half-court game. They can win playing many different styles. But with the way Pittsburgh wants to play physically, if you can get this game in the open court and get a few easy buckets, it's going to go a long way. The best way to do that is to do your job on the glass.
Well, and it ties back into the first key here as well, is just be ready for a fight, be physical, because that's the way that you're going to have to rebound in this game. It's not just going to fall into your hands. And look, you got, Armando Bacot coming off one of his better rebounding efforts, especially on the offensive glass. You've got Harrison Ingram feeling good about the way that he's rebounding the last few games. And so that's where you want to be. You want those two guys leading you. As you said, and this has become more consistent as the years has gone along too, you're starting to see the guards chip in more and more on the glass. So I feel confident that Carolina will be able to do that. I think, again, we said it when we recapped the game. One of the keys for Carolina is, what is Jalen Withers? Where is he at in terms of rebounding? Is he having a good day on the glass? Because if he is, that really is what puts Carolina over the top on that in that aspect. And I think right now it feels like he's in a rhythm. So if he rebounds the ball well in this game, that's really going to allow Carolina to have success. And as you said, I think the biggest reason why you want to rebound, why you want to create turnovers, is controlling the pace of this game. Because, yes, this is a Pittsburgh team that is not built to run with you. They've got some good guards, don't get it wrong. But this is a team that, if this game gets up and down, that's a nightmare for them. And we saw how impactful Carolina getting out in space and running was today. It's why, at times this year, we get frustrated with the fact that things get bogged down, that they want to slow the game down, because this team is so much better. They're so efficient when they get out in open space and are running the floor. That's where Elliot Cadeau shines. That's where Seth Trimble shines. And even to a certain extent, he shines really in both areas because he's just that good of a player. But I think R.J. Davis is at his best when he's getting out in space and running. And so that's what you want to see from Carolina in this game, especially early on, because if they can really establish a comfortable lead, Pittsburgh's a team that, has some guys that can score the basketball, but they're not a team that you're afraid is going to put together a huge run on you because they're getting out in space and running to counter what you're doing. So hopefully that's the mindset that Carolina is going to take in this game. If you bring that same mindset that you brought against Florida State, which was be ready for a physical battle, try to get up and down the floor, I think it's a similar recipe for success, and I think Carolina is built to do that in this game.
Like last night, ESPN hasn't forecasted the game from their analytics department, but we do have the line, which opens up Carolina 7.5-point favorites against Pittsburgh tomorrow night in the semifinals. Who wins the game and why?
I think Carolina wins the game. As you mentioned, in years past, we always kind of wondered where is the motivation for this team. It feels like this team is motivated on multiple fronts. One, look, they're not gonna forget what they were motivated by the last time in this matchup. Things are not going to change. There's still going to be a lot of hostility between these two sides, and so I think this Carolina team, especially with the attitude that you see from Harrison Ingram, Cormac Ryan, and it rubs off on the rest of the guys, I think you're going to see that in this game. I think Carolina is going to be ready for a physical fight. That was one of the things that I was wondering about going into the game against Florida State, because I knew Florida State would try to make the game a little bit ugly, try to make things a little bit chippy. They did early in the game, and Carolina responded accordingly. I think that's going to be the same thing that we're going to see. I think Carolina will be ready for it. I think Armando Bacot will be motivated to perform even better than he did the last time. I think these guards are feeling it. I like them to be able to get out in the open court and really turn up the pace of this game, which is what Pittsburgh doesn't want to see. And yeah, in terms of dominating the glass, I think Carolina can do that. They have won, 20 straight rebounding battles, something like that. At 21. So, this is just dominance that we're seeing from them. I don't think it'll be as dominant as what we saw against Florida State. That's probably asking a little bit too much. Pittsburgh has some size. They have some guys that can rebound at a pretty decent level. But I do think it'll allow Carolina, it'll be a significant enough margin to allow Carolina to do the things that they want to do in the open floor. So, yeah, I like Carolina to win, and I like them to cover. I think that it might be close. It might be like, they barely cover with like an 8-9 point win, but I do like Carolina to win and cover against the Panthers.
There was a look in this team's eye today that just, and I think it goes back to what we saw in the Notre Dame game on senior night that carried over into the Duke game where Carolina won in Cameron. This team knows what time of the year it is, and they know what's on the line, and they know what's expected of them. And I think you're going to see them build off of what they did today. I think they're going to be motivated. I don't think the one win over Pittsburgh was enough to satisfy them. I think a chance to send them home and potentially keep them out of the NCAA tournament is something that they're going to rally behind. And so I think Carolina shows up ready for the fight. I think they take the fight to Pitt, and I think Carolina wins. There's something special about playing in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. That atmosphere it's unique. It's one of the more special environments at conference tournaments, no matter if it's not being played in Greensboro, Charlotte, or anywhere else where it should be. So we saw how the Carolina fans showed up today. There'll be even more fans there tomorrow. It won't feel like a home game, but Carolina will be well represented. And I think Carolina wins and advances to the ACC tournament final, as I think they'll beat Pittsburgh tomorrow night. Well, no matter what happens, guys, we'll have you covered. HeelToughBlog.com, where we're riding around the clock to keep you up to date on the latest with Carolina basketball as they make their way through the ACC tournament. Anthony had you covered with the Florida State recap. I'll be back getting you ready for the preview. That preview will be posted tomorrow morning. And then because of a work obligation, Anthony will have you covered once again with the post game, with the game tomorrow night. Win, lose, we'll have you covered here, HeelToughBlog.com. Any news and notes that trickle out with Carolina football, of course, we'll make sure to keep you covered on that front as well. Just get in the habit every single day, guys. Visit the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Latest Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, guys, we've been encouraging you guys to rate, review, but most importantly, subscribe, because we're virtually recording around the clock and recording daily, because we're still going to preview and recap every game individually of the ACC tournament. The same thing will be said next week for the NCAA tournament. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball season. Well, with that, guys, this is going to wrap up another live edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony for hosting with me. We'll thank all of you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.